François Hollande expected there in a little under 2 hours' time. Marcus Carlson is with us. Marcus, what's the pitch from the president?
Well, towards the tail end of a 3-day U.S. tour, François Hollande is now getting down to business. He's expected shortly in San Francisco to visit Silicon Valley, as you were saying there, François. He'll be meeting with executives from tech giants Facebook and Google, and he may be facing a much tougher audience in Silicon Valley than he was in Washington, D.C., when it seemed to be all smiles, really, there between him and Barack Obama, the U.S. president. We're going to talk more about this now with correspondent Rebecca Bowring in San Francisco. She's joining us via Skype. Hi there, Rebecca. Now, President Hollande, he seemed to be trying to boost his business credentials, really, as he's visiting Silicon Valley. What's the view when it comes to France's business credentials and Hollande's business credentials where you are?
Well, Marcus, the president does face a hard sell in Silicon Valley, where he today will try and woo Google's Eric Schmidt and Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg and convince them that France is worth investing in. But he's a president who came to power saying that he didn't like the rich, walking around amongst scores of newly minted dot-com billionaires. And he said that when he came to power, finance was his biggest adversary. So now he really needs to rebrand himself as business friendly, and his country, he says, he wants it to be known as the Startup Republic. He wants Paris to be known as the Silicon Valley of Europe. And this newfound enthusiasm for business, I think, is being treated with a fair degree of skepticism here amongst the French expat business community. I just spoke to an entrepreneur who will be meeting the president for a debate this afternoon, and he was very ambivalent about his hopes for the occasion. And this visit, which has been known as Operation Seduction by the French media, I think does smack a little bit of desperation. Let's remember that he's presiding over a country that's in the economic doldrums, where growth has been stagnant since 2012, where unemployment is at a 16-year high. And yes, he has pledged to cut state spending. He has pledged to cut charges for businesses. But with his popularity at an all-time low, it really seems like too little too late. And if I were him, I would come here and I would listen and I would open my eyes and I would try and drink in and take back with me some of the contagious enthusiasm that you see in Silicon Valley and some of those values that have made it so successful: trust, access to ready capital, and a willingness to take risk.
It sounds like François Hollande is facing a little bit of an uphill battle there over in Silicon Valley when he meets with executives from Google and Facebook. There is one big issue, though, between France and these giants, Google and Facebook, and that is the tax issue. France wants the likes of Google and Amazon to pay up when it comes to taxes. Talk us through that angle of the story.
It may be that Hollande will issue a warning about what he's dubbed tax optimization today. On Tuesday, the French magazine Le Point reported that the French government was going after Google, seeking $1 billion in tax. And even though the company and the tax authorities have not confirmed that report, it does seem that it could be the elephant in the room today when he sits down to his buffet lunch with Eric Schmidt. And it's also been said that Facebook and LinkedIn are in a similar position. And France is one of a number of countries that's really cracking down on what they see as the abuse of accounting rules that have allowed these big multinational corporations to direct their revenues towards low tax EU countries and therefore pay less tax. So Hollande is vowing to close those loopholes. And despite the coziness of the White House that you mentioned yesterday when he met with President Obama, of course, Obama is not keen on Hollande or indeed any European regulators going after these big US internet firms and singling them out. And indeed, there are voices of dissent in Hollande's government too, who say that this should be tackled on a European level. However, I think he's probably going to try and drive his point home today, but I reckon that he will find a way to sweeten that kind of message, perhaps offering tax breaks for research in France, and also easy visas to scientists who want to move there. So he will try and sweeten that slightly bitter pill.
Rebecca Bowring in San Francisco, thank you very much indeed. And we're going to jump now across the Pacific from California to Asia. Airbus got a boost earlier at the Singapore Air Show there. An aircraft leasing company put in an order for 20 Airbus A380 Super Jumbos. It's seen as a lift for the European plane maker, as A380 sales have been somewhat sluggish. Looking away from passenger jets, defense companies are also looking for a boost in Singapore and in Asia overall. It's the one region in the world where defense spending is actually growing. Olivia Zalazar-Winsby has more.
When diplomatic posturing increases, higher defence spending follows suit. A commercial opportunity that aviation companies are pouncing upon at the Singapore Air Show. Military budgets in Asia are swelling as countries like China and Japan look to add hardware to their arsenals.
The realities, of course, is what's going to happen vis-a-vis the South China Sea. How do you deal with the continuing threats of terrorism, piracy, smuggling of illegal substances, components and weapons of mass destruction?
Spending in the Asia-Pacific region is growing year on year, while the West trims its outlay. Last year, China had the second largest defence budget after the US, a figure Beijing's looking to increase by some $30 billion over the next 2 years. At the air show, specialist firms are looking to lure buyers with the latest in state-of-the-art technology. Drones is one area that's on the up.
We think that there's growing popularity for unmanned systems. Maybe they could play a key role. Currently, we are having discussions with South Korea and Japan for our Global Hawk, and Australia as well for the Triton system.
One of this year's star products among the fighter jets and helicopters is the P-8A Poseidon. It might look like a regular passenger plane, but with torpedoes, depth charges and anti-ship missiles, Boeing's hoping it'll attract plenty of customers here in Singapore.
Okay, we just have time for a quick look at the stock markets, and we're seeing a mixed picture over on Wall Street this session, with the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones ever so slightly below the flat line, whereas the Nasdaq is trading up. And a reduced earnings outlook from Procter & Gamble is weighing on the Dow Jones in particular. This is where the European markets shut up shop. The CAC 40 in Paris up 0.5%. The DAX up 0.6%. That was partly due to strong corporate results and also because of encouraging trade data coming out of China. We're going to talk more about the markets and individual shares in the next business bulletin, which is coming up in around about an hour and a half or so. But now I'm going to send it back to you, Francois.
Many thanks, Marcus Carlson, with all the business news. Time now for sports and a surfeit of gold in the women's downhill at the Olympics. Let's say